session. So good morning, everyone. So for those of you who can join me, I hope you have done this question on your own. So there are only about 10 questions. In this topic is about properties of metals. So the idea of doing topical questions is so that you are more familiarized with all the concepts related to that particular topic, rather than all the topics together in one paper, because there might just be certain topics that you are very unfamiliar with or very weak in, okay? So which two properties are typical? Typical means expected of most metals. So metal, you know, itself is usually insoluble in water, but they can react with water. Some metals do react with water. So they react with acid, that is definitely correct. They react with alkali is not correct. Metal oxides, because they talk about oxide there. As you know, metal oxides are basic oxide. Why do you call them basic oxide? Because they dissolve in water. The basic oxide dissolve in water, they form hydroxide. They form hydroxide. The pH of hydroxide ions is going to be greater than 7. So basic oxide will react with acid, is correct, they don't react with alkali. They can be drawn into wires. This is a property called ductile. So you can think about copper wire connections. If where you live still have the copper wire internet cables, so those are copper drawn into very fine wires for internet connectivity. So D is going to be the answer then. Okay. Question 2. Question 2, you are talking about solid. Solid means the particles are tightly packed. As you know, they are bunched very, very close together. They are tightly packed. Or you can say bunch very tightly. Okay, so you can imagine that B cannot be the answer because there's a lot of space in between. C cannot be the answer because there's a lot of space in between. Between D and A, some students would choose D, but then they forgot to read the second bit of the question, which is called alloy. Alloy is basically a mixture. It's a mixture, meaning it is not pure. It is not pure. It's a mixture of what? It's a mixture of metals. Now, alloy is a mixture of metal. This is a pure substance because there's only one kind of substance. So a pure substance cannot be a mixture, which means D cannot be the answer because it's not a mixture. Whereas here you can see some black stuff and they are not in an ordered position. They are not in a fixed ratio because mixture is not compound. You don't need to have a fixed ratio. Question 3 is basically asking you which one is copper. Copper is a metal. As you know, copper is a transition metal because copper is found in the middle block of the periodic table. Metal can conduct electricity. So, you know, poor conductivity means cannot conduct. So B is definitely out. Metal have high melting point. This is negative. So A is out because this is low. And then density. So this one, transition metal have very high density, very dense. As you know, in physics, density is mass over volume. The mass is very high because metals are heavy. So D is the most likely answer there. Very high melting point, very high density, good conductivity because it's a metal. Question 4, these are electronic structures. They can call it electronic arrangement or they can call it electronic configurations. They are elements. You're looking for metals. Metals are group 1, 2, and 3. As you know, the group number tells you the number of outermost. Outermost meaning valence shell electrons. How many electrons are there? So we're going to look at here. This is just hydrogen, in fact. So it's considered a non-metal. Here there's only one electron there. This is group 1. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is group 5. This is 1 and 2. So there's group 2. Group 2 is our group 2 metal and group 1 metal. So element 2 and element 4 are what you consider as metals. This is hydrogen. It's not a metal. It's considered non-metal. Okay, this is 2, 1. So that means first shell and 1 in the second shell. So we're looking at period 2. Period 2, second row of the periodic table, but group 1, this is lithium. Whereas element 3 is 2, 5. Period 2, because first shell and second shell group 5, this is nitrogen, and this is element 4 is 2A2. First shell, second shell, third shell. So we're looking at third row of the periodic table, third period, and group 2, this is magnesium. Number 5 is similar to the previous question. Alloy is a mixture of metals, and we're looking at metals being solid. Metals being solid. A is not going to be the answer because A is pure. As you see, all of them are just one type. D is not going to be the answer because D is a compound. As you could see, they are in a fixed ratio. They are not random. Mixture is just mixed together, not in a fixed ratio, not in a fixed ratio like this, not in a fixed ratio like this. It's random. Random, not in a fixed ratio. Fixed ratio means the way that they combined, the white one and the gray one, not in a fixed ratio. So B is going to be the best representation of a mixture. These are compound and compound because the gray and the white one are present in a fixed ratio. They are compound. Number 6, you want to indicate that sodium is a metal. So this is called properties of metals. Good conductor, yes. Soft, okay for sodium, not okay for most metal. Okay, it says to indicate it's a metal. So we're looking for metallic properties, not just for group 1. Okay, so it floats on water. This is okay for sodium, which is fine. But then the best one that applies to all metals is basically metals conduct electricity. Number 7, so there are 3 types of steel here. I am very bad at these actually. I don't know how to do 7. I'll come back to it a little bit, okay? Number 8 is a repeat question. So alloy is a mixture. So again, these are in a fixed ratio. This is in a fixed ratio. So you see how different years, they tend to mix the option around. So it matters really how you can think about the options rather than remembering the answer. This is a pure substance. It cannot be a mixture. These are compounds because the gray and the white one are present in a fixed ratio, whereas this is a random mixing, not in a fixed ratio, just a bit of that gray stuff. Alloy is a mixture of metals. Number 9, brass is an alloy. So this is a factual question. So brass is made out of copper and zinc. Okay, copper and zinc give you brass. So brass in Malay is actually tembaga. So that is what they use to make the base for guling tangan and various other substances in the past. Yeah. Number 10, the last one, copper is a typical metal. So when you read this question, you gotta read carefully. It says which is not. This is a negative question. So copper is a metal. Metal can be drawn into wire. You can imagine copper cable for internet connections. So people actually use that. So this is correct. It is a property, which is why it cannot be the answer. Be careful, not a property. This is a property, cannot be the answer. Metal can conduct heat. Sometime in the past, people use copper cooking pan because it can conduct heat, obviously. High melting point is a metal, it's a transition metal. We saw in earlier questions that transition metals have very high melting and boiling point, very high electrical conductivity, and very high density. Poor conductor of electricity. Poor is going to be wrong. So there's going to be our answer because it's not a typical property of copper. Let me go back to the previous question. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Well, I see one thing here. Resistant to corrosion. We're looking for stainless. So stainless steel, as you know, these are the property we're looking for. When we buy certain things, we don't want it to rust. We don't want it to corrode. So stainless steel is definitely what we're looking for, which means, B and D can be out. And then easily shaped as well as brittle. Brittle means it's just like glass. It can be hard, but when it breaks, it shatters. So easily shaped cannot be mixture, cannot be high carbon, because when you think about carbon is like carbon is additive meaning to say when you have iron, then you have the carbon, carbon is smaller than iron, right? So that means the more of this carbon you have, that means the metal will have a lot of this carbon in between, And when you have more and more carbon, you cannot slide over each other. You cannot shape it easily because you have a lot of these foreign or alien carbon in between. So high carbon cannot be for number one. So high carbon cannot be because you want to shape it easily. You want to allow the iron atoms to easily move around, because when you have foreign atoms, it makes it harder for you to move around very, very easily. So cannot be high carbon there, has to be mild, which means high carbon is the one that's brittle, which means C is the answer. So despite me not knowing the best knowledge of all with these kind of questions, with this particular question, I can still do it if I think very hard about it. Okay, so that's it for these 10 questions. I'll just stop sharing now to save your data. But yeah, I open the floor to anyone who's got questions. Do you want me to show you anything from the earlier paper or from this paper that you're unsure about? You can unmute yourself and just speak out loud. If not, then we'll just call it a day. Anyone got any questions for me? Does anyone have any question for me? You can unmute yourself and speak out loud. Anything from the earlier questions? I mean, Chiguhirini already, share the videos via me, obviously. So if there's anything that you're unsure about, then you can just watch the video and let me know. Okay, so unless you've got any questions, then otherwise I'll close the session. No? Okay, no questions. All right, okay. Make sure you go through what you have done and understand your mistakes, okay? Because that's the only way you will learn. Just doing will not help you. Just doing it once will not help you. You gotta understand where you have gone wrong and go through the topics where you have gone wrong. Was it knowledge? Was it carelessness? Or was it just time? Okay, everyone, I'll stop recording and you can leave the session.